Well, hello, and a very warm welcome back to the Andrew Eborn Show with me, Andrew Eborn. Well, who else, really? Well, I'll tell you who else. It's a pair of briefs. It's that time again, joined yet again by Stephen Barrett. How are we doing, Stephen?
Good, good. I'm looking forward to Christmas.
Every day is Christmas. We love it. What are you going to be doing for Christmas?
I can't believe it's here. I mean, I do think I can't. It does feel like October, so I'm not entirely sure why it's now Christmas or how that's even legal. How is that even legal, Andrew?
Yeah.
This question, yeah, but it's it's a good year this year. I've got my child and my dad's coming, and Bella, the dog, will be here, and we'll all be together, and it'll be nice. And we've got a nice chicken coming because
A nice chicken, as opposed to those ropey old chickens. I think there's nothing better.
well, I thought I'd go push the boat out, so I've got it from a really ridiculously expensive shop, and it's coming on the 23rd, and I'm quite excited because my child wanted chicken, so
Yes.
I thought it has to be a special chicken. Am I ridiculous? It's probably ridiculous. But
How
anyway,
much did you
what I've
pay for
done.
your special chicken?
£23?
Well, that's not too bad. A friend of mine in France, they're celebrating Thanksgiving, and obviously the shops don't all carry turkeys. Certainly not in France or indeed in England around Thanksgiving time, the last Thursday in November, because they're all waiting for Christmas. They paid €500 for two turkeys. Can you believe it?
No, I mean that. No, I mean that is. I grew up poor, Andrew. No, that is mental. That's to
They
say.
could fly to America for that and have one without any
Yeah,
problem.
exactly. No, that is just insane. I can't imagine spending
That
that.
was
I mean,
insane. Well, we're talking about international
anyway,
travels. Look at that lovely segue. We were looking at international law, and we worked out that effectively it's a contract between kings, is what we say. I want to dig a bit deeper into looking about how that works, the rights and obligations, how which entities it applies to, and also to work out about jurisdiction. How do we determine that? So let's start first of all then with application. Talk to me about who does international law apply to?
well, that is the big question, and that's why I sort of explain it from the starting point I do. It's why I don't like anybody who starts talking about international law by talking about anything that isn't a treaty. And there are people who do, because ever since the Second World War, almost as though just immediately when the communists got power, international law has started to talk about customary international law. And we signed a treaty called the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, which I think was a very bad move. I don't like that. I don't like it at all. I'm not entirely sure it's incorporated. So if it's not incorporated, I can get us out of it. But we've started to recognize this idea that there are things called customary international laws. And it's a bit, you can see where the logic for it comes from. It comes a bit like case law. And it's a bit like our judges, who people think our judges make law, and that is an error as well. So if you find a lawyer who thinks our judges make law, you probably
Apart
found.
from Lord Denning.
Well, Lord Denning did it, but he shouldn't have done it. There's a lovely memo sent to somebody, sent to the Lord Chancellor at the time when he was applying to be a judge, and the Lord Chancellor was like, "He's going to be dodgy, but we probably can't stop him." And he was dodgy, and they probably couldn't stop him. But Lord Denning aside, judges should not be making law, and it's a line I hold very seriously because I know that the baddies want to re-establish that principle. They're effectively refighting the Civil War, Andrew. So if judges can make law, if that royal power once again exists in our land, then that's firstly not democratic. Secondly, that means it's like the king won the Civil War, which is nonsense. The king lost the Civil War. We cut his head off, and then we got rid of successive ones. This idea that they can somehow be back in charge rears its ugly head from time to time. Again, around this period, in the sort of post-war period, you get a case called Annis Minnick, which again I hate Annis Minnick. And I look at it and I give it a Paddington stare. And I don't like this case. This is not going to make a lot of sense to viewers and listeners, but it raised the idea that the courts would strike down an act of parliament. So they didn't do it. They just sort of said, we probably could do this. And I was just like, don't think you can. Don't you dare. And then you get, they came out again later. Dinah Rose, who's one of our leading KCs and a brilliant mind, led the court down this path in a subsequent case whose name has now completely fallen out of my head in the way that it does because I'm now middle-aged. And they said it again, and I had to give them another Paddington stare. And I looked at them, and it's really dodgy because it means that they will be effectively challenging Parliament. And this, I mean, Miller 2 was an abomination, and I got really angry at Miller 2, and a lot of lawyers did, and a lot of Miller 2, the Miller 2 judgment was like. I don't know, it must be like the X Factor final, but for lawyers. So, and my phone just went mental. It's just like, bing, 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 bing. Every lawyer I knew was messaging me. And all of them were going,
so for the benefit of those who don't know about Miller 2, just give us a couple of sentences on that.
So remember in the last episode, I talked about the Bill of Rights and how everybody needs to remember the Bill of Rights and be taught it in school. And Article 9 of the Bill of Rights says that the courts can't do anything about Parliament. The courts should go and boil their head because they're royal power and we're a democracy now. So screw you guys. And Miller 2 inverses that principle because it's the prorogation case. Parliament was prorogued, and Miller 2, the judges pretended they had the power to reverse that, and they stated that they did. Now, in the way of these things, as I say, ever since the post-war period, it's like someone's slowly edging towards the door, but they haven't actually yet quite run out of it, and you're just watching them, and you're like, "Stop moving! I can see you moving! Stop it!" And that's what my Paddington Snare is trying to do. But Miller 2 is a very funny case. It's very weird because they didn't make an order. So they didn't, and if a court doesn't make an order, a court's done nothing. It's literally done nothing. They may as well have just had a press release. So it never concluded. So Parliament acted to unprorogue itself, but wasn't compelled to do so, which I should be constitutionally fine with, and I probably am. Parliament's bigger than the Prime Minister, but I would have much preferred if Miller 2, the court had simply said, Article 9 of the Bill of Rights prevents this court from interfering in parliamentary processes. We have nothing to say on the matter. And that would have been much more happy for me constitutionally. The successor, and I've said this to the woman who did it, the spider brooch lady. I've had dinner with her, and I've told her off in the bar afterwards. And she got very angry at me. She didn't like it. But luckily I had my small child with me, so she had to stay pleasant. But I'm very firm on this line because I just don't like it. Her successor, who is really one of our greatest legal minds, and we should flag these people up when we get them because you're lucky as a jurisdiction to get them. He's also Scottish, which, I mean, I don't mean to sound surprised, but Scotland has 4.5 million, 5 million, 6 million people, whatever it's got. So as a result, they have far fewer lawyers. As a result, it's just statistically, that we have had some bad Scottish judges. But he's an absolute living genius. I mean, he makes up for all the other ones. I'd suffer all them 1,000 times over to get him again. He's an absolutely brilliant mind, legal mind, and he made a case recently, but gave a judgment recently that said cases that don't result in an order are not precedent. And everybody was like, "Why has he said that?" And it's like, Miller 2 didn't result in an order. And it's like, oh, that means Miller 2 doesn't exist. Oh, and I like that. I'm much more happy with that situation. But listeners and viewers just need to be aware that they are edging towards the door. They're trying to resurrect this old argument that royal power exists. They're not Democrats. They don't believe in Parliament. They don't believe in you and the power of your vote. I do, and I'm flagging up every time they get closer to the door. But I'm also, there are other forces that are pushing them back into the room. So we shouldn't be unnecessarily worried. But they're doing this with international law too. Yeah. So I've explained it
just before we leave that, I mean, you should name this wonderful Scottish genius that you admire so much.
Oh, that's Lord Reid.
Yes.
So Robert Reid, President of the Supreme Court, is an absolute genius. He is brilliant. And I have the other thing that I should say about him is that I have absolutely no idea what his politics are. and I adore him for
And
that.
that's got to be right, hasn't it? I mean, if you
Yes.
have judge with politics, then it doesn't really help.
No, it doesn't. Exactly. This is why there was a sort of a judge who was, I think, openly lefty, and there was a judge who was openly righty, and they were both wrong. I didn't like either of them for that. It's like I don't prefer. I'm not going to pick one of you. I
Yes.
wish I did. I wish I didn't know what your politics were.
And this is what people forget. I mean, we've emphasized this a few times, Stephen, is that judges are just there to enforce the law as it stands. They're not there to make the law. So when people criticize the judges because there's a law that people don't like, really what they're criticizing is the law, not the judge's enforcement of it. So if the judges get it wrong, well, there's appeal and various processes and safeguards. And that's the important thing to bear in mind. It's rather like sentencing. We always have about sentences. People say, oh, it's far too lenient. But the Sentencing Council, we often speak about this, they have these guidelines. So it's supposed to be very scientific, if you like, that any judge with the same evidence would basically come to the same conclusion. And I think it's such a point, it's worth sort of emphasizing every single time. So it's not the judge's fault. They're merely there to enforce the law. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, and that's really important for us to constantly say. And I hold these lines not for some sort of weirdo, just obsessive OCD reason. This is really valuable to us. This has made us a really worthwhile country to live in. I'm really glad that Parliament won the Civil War. If monarchy had won the Civil War, for a start, there would have been another one, because I don't think dictatorship is stable. Certainly not here. I think, this is one of the reasons I'm a Democrat, is that I think dictatorship will just end badly all the time. But I wouldn't want to. Would anybody like to live in a place where somebody rules because of who they were born to, and they have absolute authority over you and can make, kill you at whim? This sounds awful. This is not fun. I don't want to live in this country. It sounds rubbish. And so it is. These are fundamental parts of our country, and that's why I sort of constantly try and hold these lines. And I think the reason that I talk in public, and the reason I love this show, and the other stuff I do on my Substack and elsewhere, is that we all need to know all this. The more we know it, the safer it will be.
And as we say, Stephen, is what we're doing. We're trying to cut through the jargon. We want it to be accessible. The whole idea is in language and using examples and putting it into historical context so people understand it. That's what we're trying to do. It's all about sort of shedding more light and less heat on these subjects, because it's through understanding that actually we can make progress and get respect back. Because I always say that trust comes in on foot and leaves on horseback, and trust in the media, trust in politicians, and even to a certain extent in the law and lawyers and the court system, it has been at an all-time low, I would say. And the more that we can do to rectify that, the better. So let's get back to this thing then. In terms of applicability, in simple terms, which entities or individuals does international law apply to, and what are the rights and obligations of state versus non-state actors?
Well, this is why I've waffled on so much about the English Civil War and our constitutional approach, because I think the two are analogous. I think the same thing is happening in international law. I think that people are trying to use it to achieve an outcome that is to wield exactly the same as the king wanted to do, and the people who are, as I say, edging towards the door to wield kingly power, then they want to wield non-democratic power. And what they're trying to do, there's a phrase, Andrew, that they use, and every time they use it, I get I just know that instantly. Oh, right, you're one of them, are you? And they used it a lot during the Brexit negotiations. They just said it's illegal in international law. It's illegal in international law. The answer to that question is, where's that?
Yes.
Because there is nowhere. Okay, Narnia. Where are you suggesting that there is? And that's our constitutional answer to it, which is it's not illegal here. and that has to be a line that we maintain. And because they've been selling this for good reason, that they've been building out of Lego or building these little Minecraft worlds, we've ended up with things like the International Court of Justice, the International Criminal Court. And every time they create one, they're like, we're doing it because we're lovely and good and we don't like genocide. And it's like, and if you oppose it, they go, you like genocide. And it's like, I don't like genocide, but what I also don't like is, non-democratic power wielded by fake institutions. Yeah. And I'm really going to have to start. I think I'm going to take a much, much stronger line, because these are things that I've sort of been deeply uncomfortable about for 25 years, but now they're actively being used for badness. I mean, the ICJ has no the International Criminal Court, sorry, not the ICJ. And again, our jargon, it's all surrounded in jargon, isn't it? All these bloody letters.
Yes.
Like I'm not, I think,
IHA.
well, exactly. And
I hate acronyms.
I think the fact that the ECHR
Yes.
means two different things.
Yes, ridiculous.
Is deliberate. The same letters in the same order mean two different things. How is a non-lawyer supposed to understand that? It is obviously just designed to confuse them. And I think a lot of this stuff is designed to confuse you. I also think it's always wrapped up in woolly goodness. It's always, oh dear, I knocked a book on the floor, but it's always wrapped up in kittens, puppies, and little bunnies, you know, and we must keep the kittens, puppies, and little bunnies safe. And that's why we've got all the power over you. But it's like the International Criminal Court has no jurisdiction over Israel. So what the hell is it doing? We got one, the International Court of Justice. Look at these bloody things. What the hell are they? They purported to say, it doesn't actually, but it purported to say that we needed to give the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. Right. It has absolutely no authority over us on the colony. We said, we'll join you, but we won't give you any authority on ex-colonies. Right. So what are you doing? What are you, and they're active. So they're not just merely theoretically bad now. They're actively bad. They're using powers they don't have. They're purporting to have powers they don't have. The ECHR drives me mad because remember I talked last episode about international law being about treaties?
Yes.
What the European Court of Human Rights said was, oh, the treaty is a living document. We can interpret it however we want. Woo! It's like, I'm sorry. I think you should. I mean, if a lawyer says that, I think they should be arrested. I mean, it's nonsense, isn't it? I'll tell you what, Andrew. This afternoon, I'll call up British Gas.
Yes.
And I'll say, our contract is a living document. Woo! You need to give me £1 million because that's what I think this bit says now.
Yeah. Well, I think that's your phone call after you phoned Domino's because you were talking about their contracts beforehand. So work on that. But it is interesting because that's your starting point, isn't it? You have to turn around and say, does it apply? Because if it doesn't apply, we don't even need to discuss it.
No, exactly. And a contract is a contract is a contract. And actually, they say that. So the bad people will always I think a lot of bad people will use Latin all the time. I'm generally very suspicious of anybody who starts waffling in Latin. Now, I've said on an earlier episode that's because I'm a child of the Wolf reforms, and he got rid of Latin from. So we don't.
No, it was my favourite, but my favourite ever use of Latin. I think it's the Law Society at the bottom of their menus, and under desserts they put de minimis non curat lex. The law doesn't take account of trifles, which I thought was. I just love that. I love the idea. That's all part of your menu. So you've got to work on that sort of basis. But you're right. It goes back to our jargon again. We need to make sure that people understand this because that's how you get credibility. Because all these things are supposed to be very, very logical. And that's the point on all this thing. But let's have a look at this then, because talk about this contract and so on and so forth. One of the things they're always fighting about is jurisdiction. So when you've got so many different parties involved, how do you decide which jurisdiction should apply?
Okay, so firstly, there's a very good limerick about de minimis non curat lex that we could do.
Go for it.
It's my father's. So in my defense, it's my father's favorite limerick. It is a bit rude. So it goes like this. There once was a lawyer named Rex, whose tool was too small to have sex. When charged with exposure, he replied with composure, de minimis non curat lex.
Hey.
Which meant that his whatever was too small to be a concern of the law.
Very good.
But anyway, it's fascinating. But anyway, I was on about Pacta Sant Servanda. So I want to have a chat about Pacta Sant because I did when I came out against and said everything about international law and got piled on. I actually did a meme which was I had the famous Harry Potter image of Voldemort and all the baddies flying towards all the goodies, and they're on both sides, and the goodies are red and they're green. And I actually put Pacta Sant Servanda, which for listeners, what it means is that you have to obey the contract. That's what they're saying. So that they use Pacta Sunt Servanda, and I can come back to this again. But I put on the other side, I put Expelliarmus, because that's what our constitution does. That's what incorporation and unincorporation is. It's like Pacta Sunt Servanda, Expelliarmus. Go away.
And it's totally out of Harry Potter with waving that wand, isn't it?
Yeah, I sent it to a great mate, and I said I'm going to post this, and he said, "Honestly, you're in enough trouble as it is." And I was like, "Okay, sure." Most people wouldn't have understood it, and it would just have infuriated all the wrong uns. But they use this Pacta Sunt Servanda again. They use it against us all the time, and they're trying to establish a principle that you can be illegal in international law. But the answer just is to deny that it is a place, just to absolutely deny it. We live here in the United Kingdom, and we recognize those legal obligations. It's going to be tricky. It's going to be a bit rough. I don't know how long this is all going to survive, because they're going to do something stupid. Like, I don't know. Well, they're probably going to do something stupid about Israel because they're obsessed with it. But they could do something stupid like fine the Americans, and then Trump will just shut them all down. It's not quite a lettuce lifetime, but I would seriously question whether the UN is going to survive in its current form, because it's utterly, bent. And I'm not sure how long that is sustainable for. And these courts are often adjuncts of the UN, but it's not just the UN. They've gone around into all of these little Minecraft areas of international law, have basically been co-opted by people who are trying to wield non-democratic power. They're trying to say things are illegal in international law. It's the point that I was making about leaving the EU. I think it was a mistake to do it via EU law. I think we should have simply reasserted our constitution. I don't think we could have done politically, because we were so browbeaten and everybody was so convinced that it was so awful. But and I have no position on Brexit. I've never taken one. I'm easy on Brexit, Andrew, because I was literally holding the baby at the time, so I really wasn't paying attention to anything you people were doing outside my house. I was looking after a baby, and that was what I was focusing on. But if somebody had asked me, I would have done it via our law, just unincorporated, and not done the Article 50 process. And anyway, I'm getting off. You wanted to talk about jurisdictions.
Yes, I think it's helpful when there's conflict. So many different parties involved. It's a contract between kings. Which jurisdiction do you go to?
Well, let's talk about the functioning part of international law, because I've sort of worried everybody, and the communists are there. They're called public international lawyers. That's what they are. They self-identify. They're a little group. They won't let you in if you're not a communist. So they gatekeep their little cult. And we knew that they were happening, but we sort of ignored them because they were silly. There are all the good international lawyers are called private international lawyers, because we've sort of hived off from them. And we're interested in things like international commerce. And so we have really functioning bits of international law. We have something called the New York Treaty, which allows for a process called arbitration. And that's an answer when you're saying, oh, I don't know which court to use. And arbitration is most popular. This is really, I think it will shock our viewers and listeners, but it's most popular inside the United States. So what happens is, inside the United States, judges are elected officials, elected by the state. So if I'm a business in New York and I now want to do business with a business in Utah, the business in Utah will say, let's use our courts. And I will say, no. They like you and you vote for them and you probably give them money. Oh, no. Let's use our courts in New York. And they'll both stare at each other, and then they'll go, okay, we'll use arbitration. And so it's really standard in America for there to be it's so standard that we talked about standard terms and conditions. It's basically a standard term and condition in the US. It caused an issue over here when a nice young lady who did business with an American beautician company signed a standard form contract, and it had arbitration in it, and she literally couldn't afford to do the arbitration. She was just like, so she went to our court and said, can you declare this an unfair contract term? And they in the long run they didn't. So it's quite, and I think that, anyway, I'd like, that's one of the things I'd like to reopen and I'd try again on that. Bang, 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 bang. But the courts only said that it was it's not an unfair contract term between businesses. If she'd done it in a domestic contract, I think it would be unfair. If Domino's put in the term saying that in order to have a dispute with them, we have to do arbitration, then I think that would be an unfair contract term. So there are ways of getting around this. But yeah, jurisdiction, if nobody trusts each other, it tends to go to arbitration. Just to explain what arbitration is the New York Convention, which we've incorporated. So be glad it's part of it's law because it's law here. And we did it through the Arbitration Act. That's what we do. Boom, boom. I can tell you where it is. And it's really flexible. So it's designed to basically let people do whatever they want. So you can design your own arbitration. If you don't design it, you might pick. There are institutions, if you like, institutions with international laws, but ones that have not yet been captured by the communists, who will help you. So there's all sorts of these. I've got a chapter in a book on international arbitration. I had to go through all of them. And the most striking feature about all their procedural rules is how our courts have got two massive volumes called the White Book, and they all get by with a pamphlet. So I'm massively convinced that we don't need as many rules as we've got. I've got a mate over in Cayman, and the Cayman still uses our pre-97 rules, and he's like, our book's thinner than your two books. How have we ended up with two bloody books? Where did that? There was one book when I was a child. Anyway. And we have too many rules, but that's viewers and listeners don't care about that. But these arbitration institutions will help you, and they will set it up for you. It's customary to have more than one arbitrator. A lot of our judges do arbitration because we force them to retire at 70, which is stupid, and then they don't have anything to do, so they can go and be arbitrators around the world because they get paid vast amounts of money to do it. It happens all around the world. It's the most law ever done in hotel rooms. It's generally, you wouldn't expect there to be law going on in hotels, but there's loads of it going on all over the place. London, New York. In the late 90s, it used to happen a lot in Paris. And in the late 90s, London overtook Paris, and London has not looked back. It's one of the strings in our bow. It's not the only one. Because the other thing about jurisdiction is that if your judges are trusted, people will pick you. And we are trusted. So people will say, so if I'm a business, I mean, the Americans don't do it. The Americans tend to go for arbitration. But if I'm a business in Russia and I'm doing business with a business in Saudi Arabia, we're going to have exactly the same problem as New York and Utah have. We're not going to trust each other's courts. No. But we might trust London. So we might sign a contract. So this wouldn't be a treaty. This is just our business contract saying any disputes will be in the jurisdiction of England and Wales, dealt with by the High Court in London. And you put that in. And even if you go to arbitration, you tend to want to have a court backing up your arbitration because, as I say, a lot of it is in hotel rooms or it's in office buildings. There are no security guards, there are no policemen, so enforcement becomes very tricky. You need to use the powers of court to do that, or you might get arguments. Or what if you've got one arbitrator and halfway through the arbitration it turns out he's drunk every day? You're gonna have to think bad things happen in life. You just got to recognize this. So there's often behind the arbitration, even if it's not used, there's a court. And again, the majority of businesses will pick London. Yeah.
It is interesting on that sort of basis, and always the best time to agree is at the very beginning, isn't it? You sort of turn around and say, well, this is what's going to happen in the event of a dispute. This is where we're going to hear it. Yeah,
and that's what good lawyers do. And that's what lawyers look for. Any business contract will have a dispute resolution mechanism in it, and we all look for it. And I am utterly biased, but I'm also blessed in that I'm part of the most respected jurisdiction in the world. I've never seen anybody volunteer for Scots law. I've never seen anybody volunteer for Northern Irish law. I've never seen anybody. I mean, I've seen some weird things. Somebody volunteered for Swiss law, and that does happen from time to time. I know that people do sometimes opt for German law. I wouldn't. I've never seen anybody voluntarily adopt EU law because nobody trusts their courts. They're just not trustworthy. Yeah. But we are trusted, and those judges, and that's why I will go out and bat for them every time.
No, we love it. We punch way above our weight in the creative industry, in the legal system, in various other things as well. Finally, just for this episode, let's talk about enforcement and the mechanisms that exist in the enforcement of international law, and also why they're so often criticized as being ineffective.
Well, they're criticized as being ineffective by communists who want international law to have power over you. So be careful of that one. Just, at the end of the day, democracies should trump international law. If you're a Democrat, you should support the nation state, not this wibbly wobbly concept of Narnia law that, oh look, it just ended up being evil. But enforcement is an interesting one. In private international law, we have a system that works very, very well. I was asked. A number of lawyers were asked to advise the government during the Brexit negotiation on, oh God, what's it bloody called now? But whether or not we should make extra concessions to the EU in order to join their system, whereby court judgments automatically apply in your jurisdiction. And I said no. And that's because I don't want automatic recognition. So if you look at all the EU member states, I'm not going to name them, but there are EU member states I would not trust to pass a judgment. So if it were me and that state did a judgment against me saying I owed £1 million, there are EU member states I trust, but there are EU member states I do not trust you. So I just said, no, we don't want automatic enforcement of judges. We want our judges able to use discretion, and our judges. So what you have to do if you don't have automatic recognition of a foreign judgment is you have to go to the High Court, and you have to ask the High Court to do it. Now that I just did one recently on Malaysia. So there was a judgment in Malaysia. We didn't like it, so we were trying to block it. But actually, we didn't really have grounds to block it, so we didn't really succeed. But that's what you do. They go, Judge, we've got this judgment. Please, will you make it enforceable here? And the High Court either will or won't. It generally won't if it thinks that it's fraud. That's what it's looking out for, and that's why it's quite useful to have a High Court judge looking at it and not have automatic recognition of judgments.
Yeah, and it's a point you've emphasised beforehand. Automatic recognition can be very, very dangerous. But essentially, then, what people want to know: the International Court of Justice, the International Criminal Court, can they effectively enforce their rulings, or are they limited by state sovereignty?
No, they can't. And the public international lawyers are so much weaker than us. We've worked out enforcement and mechanisms. We've got established systems in place, an established legal argument. We all know what we're doing. They are largely a performative nonsense. The ICJ or the ICC, both of which are going after Israel, are doing it for the press headlines. You could see it in the way that the International Court of Justice, I think, deliberately misled the world into thinking that it had made a judgment that Israel was committing genocide. And then the president of the court had to go on all the press. She went on Newsnight and say, no, we didn't say that they'd committed genocide. We didn't say that. What we said is that the Palestinian people are entitled to be protected from genocide. Right. I think that statement's so obvious you didn't need to say it, because why on earth wouldn't one type of people be protected from genocide if we protected it?
It was like that, and the press again misunderstood it, or is what they say about sound bites. You totally turn around and say, look, all they're doing is regurgitating what the law says. You mustn't do it, and we've told them they mustn't do it. Oh, they've told them they mustn't do it. Oh, really? There was no judgment. They had no power to say anything other than you need to look at it. Everybody needs to comply.
Yeah, if I tell you, Andrew, you can't in law murder me, it doesn't mean that you have murdered me.
Exactly. I went on many of these places where they were misrepresenting what was said.
They were. People were deliberately doing it.
So important.
But this is why I have so little respect for public international lawyers. It is largely performative. And the ICJ didn't even say that we had to give Mauritius the Chagos Islands. They didn't even say that. They didn't even go that far. And yet still it gets misrepresented as we have to give away the Chagos Islands. They've got absolutely no power to enforce us to give away the Chagos Islands. They're going to have no power against Israel if either of the confections does this. And I really wonder how the British governments got conned into joining these things. The Americans are very sensible. They didn't join the International Criminal Court. They were like, nope, looks dodgy, not joining. And it's just like, seems sensible. We know, as a fundamental truth, Andrew, we know that you need appeal courts in order to have a fair justice system. Yet none of these bloody things have an appeal system. Yeah. The ECHR, I can't appeal it. Well, no. Can I appeal it? The ICJ, can I appeal it? No. ICC, can I appeal it? No. It's just like, this is insane. Why would you do
No,
this? I
you're
just,
absolutely right. And again, I mean, the lesson in all of this is that we always urge caution, always look beneath the headline, work out, is that really what they're saying? And I use that example and say just regurgitating the law on genocide and the reasons for it doesn't mean that somebody's guilty of it. And you've had some extraordinary, as you say, it's a sort of PR exercise, if you like, for a lot of these things as well. Look, we've run, I never say we've run out of time. In the next episode, we're going to be digging deeper into this. As always, if there's anything that you'd like us to examine, to unpack, do get in touch at Andrew Eborn, at Octopus TV. I'll pass you on to Stephen as well. Do have a look at his Substack and do subscribe, because it's only as a result of your subscription that we can continue doing this, unpacking in that sort of way. It has been an absolute pleasure as always. Stephen, thank you very much for joining me. We look forward to seeing you next time.